This is a clouds weather alert.
Good late Thursday, early Friday. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, coming on the air as we have a very serious winter storm situation that we're anticipating as we look ahead into the timeline here. And, just many states going to have big time problems. I have this graphic up first here looking like a devastating, in some cases it'll be a catastrophic southern ice storm here this weekend. Maybe, something we don't really even see, but maybe once a generation at most here in some areas. This is such a big deal. Major damage expected here in some communities. So you got to wrap up preparations for this event. Time, is running short. You have 24 hours or less in a lot of spots. Some spots a little bit more than 24 hours, but not much here. So it's 2 a.m. on this Friday morning when I'm live. So on the 23rd. So that's giving you some time reference. I'll go through some model guidance here in a moment. Have a graphic in here with some of the numerical data here as well that I put together, trying to forecast some things. I'm using the European model, the GFS model, to come up with my ice totals. When I show that here in a few moments, what I'm currently anticipating in general, granted, there's going to be fluctuations. It's something where I'm just, going off of using the European model, that like about 2/3 way in it, that, way there, and then about 1/3 for the GFS. And I know we didn't have time here in the Weather Center to get the latest European. I'm using the 18Z for that, but it is the 0Z GFS. There's a lot going on. We'll get to that, but this graphic here really leading off, just if you're in those areas there from Texas to Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi to Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, to South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. Some of those spots are going to see a devastating event here with ice. I know in some cases are wanting to follow those local meteorologists even because, there's going to be some minor little changes that'll make big impacts, in the actual, reality in terms of the ice totals here. And there's going to be snow to the north. Some areas, up in toward D.C., New York are going to get a big, big snow event. But that's something, albeit, still can be dangerous, still can be problematic. It's easier to be handled than a southern ice storm. This is going to be a winter storm that covers an incredibly huge geographic area. It's so scary, quite honestly. We're talking about more than half the country in terms of the number of states being impacted here. That is just remarkable. It's not, maybe we don't want to call it this at this point because they're, obviously in different situations. There's big differences. I know as we were looking back that we had the storm of the century in 1993. Again, don't want to say that directly because of the different, paths of it. So there were way different impacts in a lot of areas, but this has, some of the markings of one of the bigger storms that we're going to see here this century, believe it or not, in the country in terms of winter weather. This is very bad, what we're seeing in some of the models. The ice is the problem. Snow can be a problem, but, especially when you have sleet mixing in and the like, but generally, not always, but generally that can be handled easier. But with the ice, we're going to have a big problem, and you guys got to make sure those folks there, if you're watching from that area there I'm talking about, which I'll get to with more details here in a little bit. If you're in that area, you need to make sure your emergency supply kit is up to date. That includes water, canned goods, radio, batteries there. We're talking about extended power outages expected in many areas. This ice is going to knock power out for days, weeks in some cases here toward portions of the country. I know you just got to chart up the devices to give you as much power as you can. Get some maybe battery backups, or I know that's not going to help you maybe too much in some cases, but just ways to extra battery tools, even batteries to try to have that phone last longer. Granted, some of the cell phone towers are probably out as well. So this is such a tricky situation here. I know, when I say radios and batteries, you might be in a situation you don't have internet, you don't have phone service, you don't have power. Maybe you can get some type of radio system, or excuse me, from the radio system, you can get some type of radio signal. It might even have to be a distant one because some of the local radio stations might get knocked off the air in your area. So maybe you can at least get some way to know what's going on, even if it's from maybe a, good ways away on the radio. I know at night you can get pretty good overall carriage there of the overall radio signal. So something to be mindful of there as we're kind of looking at the overall situation. So I know battery is important to prolonged, like radios and the like, and a hand crank radio could be helpful. Canned goods are good in these situations. Water is very important there. We've talked about milk and bread, what to have in here. I know the generators are very important. You got to be really careful because I know we had an ice storm in '09 in western Kentucky, parts of Kentucky, where a lot of folks ended up dying from carbon monoxide poisoning because they were using generators that can't be used indoors. They were, not storing those in the proper area there. And I know a lot of people are going to be tempted to want to use a generator. You just got to use it properly, though. I know this home generator generally are, your better option there. But as you're looking here, you just got to be in a situation here where it's going to be so cold. You just got to make sure you're using these properly, because if you're not, carbon monoxide is even a greater risk, even than just, you're cold. It's going to be so cold after this comes through in a lot of areas and people without power. You want to have those blankets there. You really want to have those blankets and the like in this type of scenario. This is a very big deal here, and you just got to try to stay warm. And hypothermia could become a risk for some folks. Eventually, if the power's out for so long here, and you're just not able to stay warm, this is, something the whole country's going to have to come together for in terms of fixing the power equipment in the aftermath, it would seem. Some areas will fare a lot better than others, but as we look here, as we track things, we're just seeing a situation where there's going to be major damage to trees and power equipment in some zones, and numerous accidents are likely. Bridges will be very slick, and in the worst case scenarios here, you may even have to move to that interior room or a basement for a time. This is something you got to really be mindful of here as we're looking, as we're tracking things, because we're talking about the trees that could be coming down. We're hearing them just every few minutes come down around you, and you want to make sure you protect yourself as best as possible. Might even need that bicycle helmet on, as if it's a tornadic situation here. Now, we have a local tornado risk now, Tallahassee, Albany, westward, later Sunday, which we'll get to here in a moment, but not talking about the tornado risk there in the ice part. I'm just talking about all the trees are going to be coming down from the weight of the ice that, it's going to be so thick in some cases here. It's going to be so problematic, so dangerous here. And I will have special coverage as needed, but at points there's going to be just, so many people without power, so many people without internet, cell service, and the like of cell phone towers will probably be impacted. It's going to be a situation where you gotta go ahead and kind of know what to do ahead of time, because once the power starts going out, once the signals start going out, you're going to almost be on your own here, potentially, in some spots. Not everybody in these states that, will have that. A lot of folks will still have power, but there's going to be a corridor in here with this extreme ice, a crescent type totals, just remarkable in a very, very bad way here, folks. As we're looking at this situation, I know where there's mostly snow, it's going to be more about staying safe while having fun. But if sleet mixes in, that can be an issue here. And we got to watch out for slick spots. There's going to be a lot of those all over the country. As slip and falls will happen. And in addition, temperatures, as they do warm, granted that's going to take time, we could eventually have fallen dangerous, ice here. As we're looking at the scenario, it's going to be very cold. I know I was doing a forecast for some relatives up there in Missouri there, and some areas around St. Louis, once they get below freezing here with this event, as we're looking ahead, Friday into the weekend, they're not going to get above freezing again, maybe all the way till about February the 2nd, folks. They're not going to get above freezing for over a week. So it's going to be, just stuff that's on the ground, maybe more snow up there, but it's not going to melt. I know they'll have to use different equipment to clear the roads and the like, but there's just going to be all sorts of, wintry weather impacts you got to be aware of for an extended period. And in areas that have the ice, some of these areas, they may thaw out a little bit quicker, but there's still going to be time where you're below freezing, and that's going to be very problematic. It's going to make it harder for the crews to get out there and do the repairs until things do start thawing out. So this is very serious, folks. This is, like what you'd see in a hurricane, one that impacts a wider area, to be quite honest, than most hurricanes. And on Florida, we're going to be much warmer for a while, but we're going to have our cold eventually here, our cold temperatures again. And then as we head toward like next weekend, we could have, some air here that starts to mix with precip in terms of that colder type of temperature profile, but we shall see on that. We are going to have a hard freeze, it looks like, from many Tuesday morning in our far northwestern counties, maybe Monday morning, but that would, be kind of just a regular freeze at that point versus, other areas not even close to that Monday morning because we're going to have still, rain that's coming through. That'll be, the storms that were to the west, that'll be weakening that point. But you see house fire more common, dangers of space heaters and candles, that can be a problem. I mean, space heaters when the power is on in general, or generator on, but when you have the power off, maybe you're tempted to use candles. You got to be very careful. Don't really want to leave those on at night. I mean, if you have to use a candle, you're really not supposed to. And the idea of that is because that can cause a fire very rapidly if it flips over. But if you have to use a candle, just pay attention to it. I mean, we're in a spot where you got to stay warm somehow. If you have to use a candle, then just make sure you're paying attention and don't really, have it on there at night, because if it flips over, you're gonna have a fire very quickly, and the fire crews, might not be able to get out to you until it's too late. And then you have pipe problems here. They're going to be bursting in some areas. We can even have that concern here Tuesday morning. That's, one of the few concerns that we have on this graphic for our area compared to the rest of the country. So, again, we're just going to be, really, really, really concerned here about this historic, devastating, catastrophic event. Whatever additives you want to use here, I know we will go ahead real quick and say some of our local weather. We have to talk about Sunday's risk of some severe weather. We're going to be on as needed throughout the weekend here to keep you guys safe and informed on the different platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. But as we look here at the local map right now, you do see here 40s, 50s, the predominant story. I broaden it out though, and you can see though the cold here coming into play in spots as we get further north. I mean, these are actual air temperatures below zero by a wide margin as we get to some of these spots, and then some of these areas even have some wintry weather. But we're going to have a area here coming from the west, and that's really going to be our trigger for all of this. And we're going to have the contrast of the air masses, and we're going to have big, big, big problems here as we look ahead in the timeline meteorologically. So let me go ahead. And I know eventually we're going to use some of the ARRR guidance a little bit more, but right now we're just going to kind of use the American model for this view. So let me go ahead and take off the actual radar here. Gonna go ahead and see what we can come up with in terms of some of the model information here. So I'm gonna zoom in just a bit, and we're gonna go ahead and look here at some of the different details here, the different intricacies and the like here of the situation. You can see, not seeing too much wintry weather early on this Friday, but as we progress things here, you can see that starting to come into play quickly later Friday into where Texas and Oklahoma, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things, and as we're looking in that pink, that'd be more about sleet, and that bluish color more about freezing rain. The green is regular rain, when we have temperatures above 32. So you don't have that initially at least freezing on contact, and the white is snow. The white and the gray, there's snow. I know sometimes when you have it a little whiter, that's a little bit heavier, but you have a lot of heavy snow like Tulsa could have a big snow out of this. Many areas are going to have a big snow though, and we have to focus on the ice because that's what really causes the power outages. But the snow can cause road problems, sleet can cause road problems here. It's just a really nasty scenario on our hands. This is early Saturday. You see the ice moving through Dallas with the ice storm impact there. You see the sleet there in the pink. As we keep on progressing this, I need to zoom out because it starts to get, just a bigger area where we're going to have the impacts here. You can see areas there as we're looking toward like parts of Missouri, all that snow coming up there. It's not even the, biggest impact out of all this here by any stretch. Even that'll be a big deal. And if it was just snow, that'd be a big deal in and of itself. But what makes it truly historic, more like a tornadic situation in terms of the tree damage, in some cases, some scenarios, just so many of them falling here, is going to be the ice, as we're looking, as we're tracking here, as we keep on progressing this, we're just going to have so much ice accretes in there, as we're looking toward like Saturday night. You see all that in there. You see as we get into early Sunday, parts of Tennessee and North Georgia there, South Carolina, North Carolina, going to have that big problem. You have a little bit of that around Houston, are going to have some problems with roads being slick and the like. The worst to be north of there, but it'll still be something where people really probably don't want to go out on the roads. But nothing like other parts of the country where we could just have a generational event here, a once in a generation, or even less often type of reoccurrence interval. So as we go ahead and look here, as we progress things, you can see just this overall wintry impact. This is Sunday afternoon here. This is a very long term type of event here in terms of the timeline. This is Sunday night going into Monday. You still see that ice coming down, and with that freezing rain scenario into toward like North Carolina. And then as we get into early Monday, you see all that snow up there, like toward New York, and finally starts to push out here as we're looking and tracking things. As we give you guys the very latest there, as I have to zoom so far because it's such a big wide extent with this. As we're looking at the overall situation, it's just remarkable and not in a good way. So, I mean, the folks that get a lot of snow, a lot of you, if you can handle that, that's great. But the ice, people can't handle the ice like what we're expecting. Just historic numbers, devastating numbers. We've got to take this very, very, very seriously. I know we are going to have a local severe threat as well that we have to take seriously. Not historic, but still, it is something that's coming into play because things have edged a little bit north. We were talking about maybe freezing rain from Albany northward the other day. Now it'll be probably north of Macon where we have freezing rain here in general in Georgia. So that does indicate, some warmer air even in here and a severe threat. So I need to go ahead and take this out of winter mode. And you'll be able to see here some of this is not going to show up perfectly by any stretch or not in range for the higher risk information. This is something, though, I know with our severe threat back in 1996. We had an ice storm situation that impacted Alabama and some other zones. And on the southern periphery, we had tornadoes around Jacksonville there. Now, here in the timeline, it's going to set up a little differently because that was closer to the evening. With this thread, probably closer to Tallahassee or west with the instability and just the overall perimeters that would be most focused at that point. It'd be further off toward the west with the overall boundary and the like here. We've had other winter storms 2021 to threat. All of a sudden, we went up this way into Damascus tornado, I believe, that came through southwest Georgia. Really went to like enhanced not out of the blue completely, but it really ramped up quickly. So we got to pay attention. We got to remain alert this weekend for our western counties. This shows Sunday afternoon to Sunday evening. I know it could even be a situation that areas, maybe just west of our covered areas, some of the TV stations like Dothan, Panama City have to cut into the NFL playoffs. That's going to be problematic. Really talking mainly about CBS because I don't think Fox they're not really cutting in over there in Dothan, Panama City. Depends. Some areas have Fox with the weather, operation, but Tallahassee, Dothan, Panama City, I don't believe they do there. But like a CBS is the early game there. Denver hosting New England. So that could get interrupted here on CBS stations in those areas, and that can lead to complaints. But it's because it's about protecting you and your family. It's always more important. The weather is in a game. Be good if double boxes can be utilized, but the weather is always more important in the game. Some areas are going to have ice storm covers too, for a long period of time. Not 100% sure if that's going to cover up the games, but some folks aren't going to watch the game because the power died in so many places. The first game I'm talking about, and later on the second game on Fox there, it's going to be, of course, the LA Rams at Seattle. Those games decide who goes to the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 60 there in Santa Clara on February 8th. I know we had a situation back. It was, we had a sad anniversary there. 8 Albany tornadoes. And just something here where 9 years ago, it was a situation where people, they were having to prioritize on that same type of weekend, AFC, NFC championship type weekend, prioritize life and safety over football. So that's what's going to be the case here this weekend as we're looking and as we're tracking things. As we look here, this is Sunday evening. Let's get you to about 10 o'clock, 1 a.m. You see some rain coming around. It's dark, but you don't see as much of the brighter color. I'm going to switch to another model here now. That's not going out far enough, so let's go to this one. And you can see this is a look at some of that. It's possible that severe threat sets up more Dothan, Panama City than in our covered area, but it's not 100% yet. And they're probably, if they haven't already issued it, let me see if they put this out. Probably going to be issuing at least a marginal risk here for Sunday for some areas. So let me go ahead and see that because it's about time for that day 3 convective outlook here to come out here. As we're looking, they sent out the day 2 to the SPC. Have they sent out day 3 yet? I don't think so. I don't think that's come out yet, unfortunately. It might come out before we're done, though, because we have a lot to get to here, a lot to get through, obviously, in this type of scenario. Looking, yeah, it may, be closer to the end of this update, but probably have some type of marginal risk, I would think, there for like southeast Alabama, the western, and maybe even into the central Florida Panhandle and the southwestern Georgia, somewhere around there. We're going to have just all the, overall parameters come together here in terms of like a warm front, cold front, low pressure. Now, granted, that triple point's a little north, but just the overall pattern is going to allow some of the activity to maybe be on the severe side. Maybe just get gusty winds. It's possible that could be the case too. But you see all that wind there coming on up from the south. That's going to bring in the moisture and the overall conditions to be a little more ripe for some stronger storms. Before we have that quick wind shift to bring in colder air back on the western side of this, those northwesterly winds coming on in. So as we're looking and as we're tracking, I know I had that out of winter mode, but I was just trying to see our strong storm threat on Sunday. Severe storm threat there in those western counties, talking about Liberty and Franklin, in our Florida zones, maybe in the Gadsden, Leon, Wakulla, and then in Georgia areas west of about Albany there. So you have Doherty and points west of there. You extend that down to like about Cairo, Thomasville, give or take. So again, and points west is where we'd have a chance here of some warning, maybe some tornado warnings before that starts to kind of weaken down. It could again be more out toward Dothan, Marietta, Panama City, maybe even Pensacola there, Mobile, southern Mississippi, not out of the question there, Pascagoula, Gulfport with that too, we shall see. But again, we'll just kind of see how that sets on up, because close to the Gulf there would be more instability in theory, but we have to shear parameters interact. If we get enough of that interaction, that's where we could have some issues. So, let me go ahead and go back to the other graphic here now about our just overall winter storm. I know this is going to be a big deal, obviously, a crippling event in terms of the ice impact. Just not going to be able to get on the roads for a while. In some cases, not going to have power for a while. Going to have trees fall, some on people's homes, a lot probably, on the power equipment. And this is probably going to be a deadly situation. Sadly, I hate even saying that ahead of time, because we want to mitigate the impact as much as possible. But this is very serious. This is going to be worse than some landfall and U.S. hurricanes we've had. Not all of them, but some of them. That's how big of a deal this is here as we're looking. Worse than some landfall and U.S. hurricanes over the years and the decades. These ice storm impacts here, the numbers, this is a graphic. It took me a while to put together. I know the models shift around. I've used the 18Z Euro and the 0Z GFS, and you kind of weighed the Euro there a good bit more, 2/3 for this. So it's a little bit tricky in that we had the Euro update on us. Little Rock would go down a little if I had time to do the calculations. I actually had to put a calculator. I don't have to do that here, but I just felt we needed to go ahead and put something like this together, but don't want to use the exact numbers because there is some still difference in the tracks, some models, so, none for one area and then even more for some of the other areas, and we want to account for the margin for error. So there'll be some of these spots that won't really get much at all. Most probably will get some now, and some areas actually get probably even more than what I have on here, which is crazy because it's just a quarter of an inch, a fourth of an inch of freezing rain slash, ice there, that accumulates and that accretes, and you see power outages, that risk quickly increase. So not good at all. And I had just had so, many places I needed to put on here. A couple places I might, if I do this graphic here again, and just update this graphic again, and further updates depending on the next time we come on, if I need to add some more places in here for this forecast that I have, for this expectation, I would probably add Monroe, Louisiana. That Arklamass area is going to have problems, and then Raleigh, North Carolina as well. I just didn't have enough room on the graphic. I'd have to shrink some stuff down. We already had it set up here for like 14 different places, 14 different areas, and this just shows you that's not even enough, really, in how bad and how widespread this event's going to be in the overall risk. But you see, I'm calling an extreme risk there. Widespread, long duration pattern is likely, at least in the area of Greenville, South Carolina. It's looking like maybe over an inch thick, which is just awful. We're talking about Clemson, South Carolina, and the like in there. In Richmond, Virginia, over an inch thick there. Again, just awful. Nashville, Tennessee, almost an inch thick. Again, this is not going to be the exact, numbers that we see, and it'll vary by location, obviously, but just trying to give you a general idea how bad this is going to be, because it's a quarter of an inch. You really start to see power outages. It's over, a tenth of an inch or so, or a tenth of an inch, you really have slick roads, especially like around Tallahassee. We had that when I was there in 2014, even less than a tenth of an inch. So to have, 10, maybe more than that times, a number of a tenth of an inch of ice is just absolutely awful. It's mind-boggling. If you have something like this in history, generally it happens in a more confined area, but for this to happen in so many places is just awful. It looks to be just a catastrophic, horrific situation here, to be quite honest here. It's just awful. Little Rock, I would probably go down a little with that based on some of the latest runs. I think Euro had a half-inch thick now of ice, with GFS keeping it further south. So Little Rock may switch over a little bit more to the high risk for, if you have maybe widespread power outages, but they're not as long a duration. Because when I say longer duration, what I mean by that is instead of just the lines going down from the weight and trees going down, you might have the entire infrastructure go down here in general, because you have poles that's falling everywhere. You might have to rebuild the power grid in some cases when you're getting over 3/4 of an inch thick of ice. That's how bad we're talking here. We're talking about, like, some of the worst hurricanes we've had. Granted, this is different, but when we get over a 3/4 of an inch there, over 3/4 of an inch thick of ice, we're talking about maybe having to rebuild a power grid here. It's awful. It's awful to have to talk about for this many areas. I hope this is wrong. I really, I hope this, somehow we get lucky. I mean, there is a factor in here that the trees aren't, maybe in a lot of cases, having much in the way of greenery on them, so it may make it a little harder for some of the ice to accumulate on them, which might, in an isolated case here, kind of reduce some of the trees, the risk of them falling just every, almost one of them there, it'll probably reduce that some in the hardest hit areas, because it'll be a little harder if you don't have stuff for the ice to grab onto. But this is awful. We're talking about Nashville, Little Rock again. That's one area I think we're going to go down a little bit with that. But Athens, Georgia, and it is issued the Weather Service office in the area an ice storm warning for Gainesville, Georgia area, which they're saying maybe an inch of ice possible is what I was reading, I believe, here right before I came on the air. Charlotte, North Carolina's in here again. Raleigh would be in here too, but I had 14 places and I didn't have enough room for Raleigh and Monroe here, and there's Monroe, Louisiana, the arc limits. Those areas are gonna have big problems too. Memphis could have big problems, 1/8 of an inch thick, potentially with the ice. Again, some areas will get lucky and they won't see these numbers come to fruition, but most of them will, and some areas I actually probably see numbers higher than what I have on here, which again, it's not good. Bowling Green, that's for what, let's see. Western Kentucky University is there. 3/4 of an inch or so of ice accumulation. Shreveport, Louisiana, we're talking about 0.73 inches. I know we also have areas like Texarkana could have a big problem. Potentially Atlanta, Georgia is right on the edge of the worst, but still could have big problems. That's, for a metro area to have that much ice accretion is still going to cause a lot of power outages probably. And, that's just so many people there in that region to have, damage so much power equipment there. And then Knoxville, that's University of Tennessee. We're talking about a lot of issues there potentially. Started to go down a little, but still Dallas, Texas, that's where FSU, I believe they traveled to SMU for basketball for Saturday. I'm not sure if that game's going to get played, especially Saturday with that ice like it is. A lot of basketball games have moved around, just, incredible changes in terms of the number of basketball games having to be shifted around. That might be another one. Last time I checked, it hadn't been in May. Let me just double check, make sure I haven't missed something on that. There's just so many games that have been shifted in the scheduling because of the ice impact, the ice event, the historic event here. Honestly, wouldn't be surprised if some of them end up getting postponed, even not just shifted in time, but actually postponed. So, not a fun situation as we're tracking things here at all. I have Northwest Alabama in here because Huntsville is looking like less now, because we could have a little bit of warmer air coming in. We have that severe threat coming from the south. So that's why I put Northwest Alabama still could be almost a half-inch thick. We got to remember areas like Tupelo, Mississippi, another area I could have put on here. They're going to have big problems. Jackson, Mississippi looking like, a little less, but there's still some scenarios. The American model is still more aggressive, and the European model not really showing it. So we got to account for that potential here and that margin for error. So again, this is a big deal, obviously. Again, all you need is a quarter-inch stick of ice to really have the power outages, mount and go up quickly. Again, once you start getting over 3/4 of an inch, give or take, on just the exact scenario in the local area, you really start having the whole grid here. In some cases, once you get higher and higher, having to be rebuilt. That's not good because everything just gets knocked over because the weight of the ice. I know it's hard to understand because I've never really seen it more than just the lower levels here in our covered area. I had some of this to about a 10th of an inch at FSU in 2014. But when you get higher numbers of and higher accumulation total of ice, the weight of the ice just starts to weigh on things. Moisture is heavy and ice is very heavy, and once it weighs on the power lines and the trees, it knocks them down. It just, the weight, they can't handle it anymore, and it just pushes them down here, and that it causes them to collapse in some cases. It's not a good situation, obviously. Again, this is unbelievable, just forecast I'm having to put out. To be quite honest, it's not something, I know most things you kind of think could happen, but it's one thing to have ice to an inch in about maybe half of these areas or something, or the 3/4 or half or whatever. To have these numbers in maybe like, a couple states, a confined area, okay, that can happen, that has happened. But to have it over this wide of an area here, from west to east, I mean, it's you gotta hope it doesn't happen. We hope, get some warmer air in here to kind of disrupt some of this, because this is just gonna be awful. This is going to be a winter storm of a lifetime here now, more than likely. Again, going over this again, Clemson, South Carolina area is going to get it bad. Richmond, Virginia is going to get it bad. It looks like Nashville, Tennessee, big problems. Again, Little Rock going to have some pretty big problems. Again, they might be more shifted to the high versus extreme risk, because southern Arkansas could take it on the chin there. Crossett, Arkansas, for instance, could have big problems there. Ruston, Louisiana, Monroe, Louisiana. We have Charlotte, North Carolina. We have Memphis, Tennessee. The Bowling Green, Kentucky. Of course, you have Memphis, the school there in Memphis, in West Tennessee. You have Bowling Green, that's Western Kentucky. Shreveport, you have Atlanta, you have Georgia Tech there. Again, we already mentioned the University of Georgia here quite a bit. It's going to be a little worse there versus Georgia Tech, but still bad in both places, it would seem. Again, it really drops off as you get down to like Macon, and Mercer may not have any ice. It's possible, or low levels of accumulation, maybe some black ice in the wake of the precip. But I know Dallas, Texas, that's SMU or FSU's been headed out to. I believe they arrived. They were going to arrive Thursday night early to get there to play that game Saturday basketball. I don't know if that's going to happen because of the scenario. Northwest Alabama, obviously Jackson, Mississippi, again, Monroe, Ruston, Raleigh, North Carolina. They're not on here. They're going to have problems. There's so many different places you could put on here. Tupelo, Mississippi as well. You're going to have big problems here. Okay, this is from the Weather Prediction Center and National Weather Service. Key messages for the winter storm and the snow threat you see in that blue. We're not talking about that as much because that's something, even though it's going to be a big deal, it's something that a lot of folks can handle here if they're just staying at home and the like. And the power will probably be on for most folks. Still, a lot of these totally going to be enough to have to stay off the road and really have the equipment to clear the roads. But if you're in the freezing rain, this is further down in areas that don't get this. Really, and anywhere that had this type of freezing rain would be a problem, and this doesn't happen very often over this wide of an area. Seeing that red zone on the bottom map there, you can see from Texas all the way through Virginia or so, even a little West Virginia in there. I mean, it's just awful situations. What we're talking about, widespread heavy snow. Some totals are going to exceed a foot there across the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. As we're looking and as we're just tracking things here. That's one thing. I know Tulsa, the numbers are going up for them. We have areas in southeast Missouri, Cape Girardeau, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, and then we get all the way across to like areas there in New York City and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. and Boston there. Going to have snow issues, but the ice, the catastrophic, the devastating hurricane-like impacts in some areas. I mean, these areas so far inland, you don't maybe ever have a hurricane impact that's bad. So you're just going to see an impact You know, we've had tornadoes in these areas, but to have this wide spread of an impact, it's going to be something that some folks really haven't seen in their lifetime, based on all the analysis I've been doing here, and many other meteorologists are doing as well in the country. The local meteorologists at the local TV stations, local weather operations, and areas there across the country. Pay attention to them on this situation. I know it's a situation here where we have just a widespread freezing rain and sleet expected there south of the primary snow axis, affecting parts of the southern plains, lower Mississippi Valley, Tennessee Valley, the southeast and southern Virginia. Again, reading that verbatim some, but significantly, impact. So it's going to significantly impact areas, and in some cases where to locally have catastrophic. We talk about Cat 5 hurricanes. Those are catastrophic. It's different. We're going to have some wind, that's 20, 30, but it's not about the wind directly. Granted, that can help to bring some of the trees down when that picks up with the ice being so bad. But it's about the ice accretion, the ice accumulation, the freezing rain, which is the same thing. When I'm talking about that, it's the potential for long duration, very long duration power outages, extensive tree damage, and extremely dangerous or impassable travel conditions. I mean, you have Tyler, Texas, you have Shreveport, Louisiana, Monroe, and Ruston, Louisiana. You have areas in southern Arkansas here. You have areas there like Crossett and Hope, Arkansas. Texarkana is right on the border there, of course, of that state there, as we're looking down toward parts of Texas and Arkansas. And then you have areas, Little Rock's on the edge, where they're going to have some problems there as well. As we're tracking things, you have Memphis, Tennessee, Jackson, Tennessee. Down there, you get back into Mississippi, you have Tupelo, you have Starkville, you have Oxford. So we're talking about Mississippi, University of Mississippi, Mississippi State University. You have areas in North Alabama. Huntsville's right on the edge of some of this. It may be more northwest Alabama, but then you go further back into Tennessee. As we're tracking things, you do have areas there like Nashville. Of course, so highly populated. It's going to be a big deal in Nashville. It's going to be a crippling event, it would look like right now. You have areas east of Nashville, like Knoxville, Cookville. You also have areas there like Kingsport, Tennessee, Johnson City in there. You have areas there like Asheville, North Carolina. Don't want to leave out Roanoke and Richmond in Virginia. You have in South Carolina. I'm going to leave out some folks. It's just we don't have enough time and you can't go over every city, but North Carolina real quick again. We're talking about Raleigh as well in there, as well as Charlotte, and then you have Columbia and Greenville and Clemson, South Carolina. So that university in the ACC, Clemson, of course, all the universities in the triad there around Raleigh. You have Duke and North Carolina and Wake Forest in the vicinity, and then you also have NC State. We're just seeing big problems here. Georgia Tech and Georgia. Gonna have big problems here in general. Again, the snow, still a big deal, but in that red zone, this could be a big problem that, one of the worst storms we've ever had in this country. Hurricane or not. It's not a hurricane. I'm just trying, in terms of the spatial geography here and the impact overall, this is going to be worse than some landfall, not all of them, but some landfall in U.S. hurricanes in terms of like the number of power outages and, sadly, then, probably got to use those generators safely. Probably the numbers, injuries and fatalities are going to exceed a lot of those landfall and U.S. hurricanes over the years and the decades as well. We got to try to mitigate those. We still have time. Prepare, please. I know you just got to be ready. You got to be ready here. In the wake of the storm, communities from the southern plains to the northeast will contend with bitterly cold temperatures and dangerously cold wind chills. This will prolong hazardous travel and infrastructure impacts. In the next week, preparations should be completed as soon as possible. And you still want to monitor the forecast. But weather radios are also helpful. I know, very helpful in some cases here to learn about what's going on. Honestly, even, it's not a tornado situation up there. So probably just to be able to listen to media, because I would assume some places you're going to be without power. Now, if you have a generator, that's great, but then you're probably not going to have cable, you're not going to have internet, you're not going to have cell service in some cases here. as we're looking and as we're tracking things. So it's going to be a scenario. Maybe if you have an antenna, granted some of those might fall in this type of ice event here as we look further up. But if you have that issue, then maybe you can turn to just a handheld radio, powered, type of radio. Using, when I say powered, I mean by batteries or by hand crank, that type of radio. And even if you can't get your local channel because they're off the air, maybe you can get some distant type of communication. Might have to be 100 miles away, but at night you can hear at least what's going on here. It might not be everything, and maybe you'll get lucky in your local radio station. They'll still be on the air. It'll be probably the case in some spots here as we're tracking. So very scary situation for some folks here tonight. You got to take this very seriously. I know it doesn't scare you like you see a hurricane on a map coming your way, and the winds are nothing like a hurricane with this. The wind, there'll still be some big impacts from them because from the winds, because the overall situation here will be one here where just the ice are creasing so much that it doesn't take much wind to knock things over. But the winds are not going to be necessarily, generally, hyper local. You want to look at your local forecast to make sure, but in general, the winds are going to be just extreme from this, just 20, 30 miles an hour. But that's enough to knock down trees. If the ice is already on them, it's going to make it happen quicker than if you have lower winds. So this is a big problem. This is a big deal. You got to take it as serious as you can here. As we go ahead, though, and look ahead, the types of precip, snow, you want to see snow. Some areas, if you get all snow, as we look further north, that's a lot better story. Still can be impactful, very impactful, but it's not as crippling as that freezing rain. Sleet can still make things pretty slippery if you get a whole bunch, like on the edges of some of these areas that switch over. There could be a whole bunch of sleet accumulation. That's like, when you have hail accumulate, it's not the same thing directly, but when you have that accumulate here, that sleet, it could be so much it makes things so slick. And then you mix that with snow, freezing rain, and the like, and you have a mess. And then the rain, that never refreezes when it happens, though some areas could just get rain, and eventually they could have black ice from the lingering moisture. But here's a freezing rain example from 2014. When I was at FAC, we're talking about a 1/10 of an inch or less of ice accretion. On that, we're talking about some areas are going to have 10, 15 times as thick of ice as that. Bad, bad news. The table there, 10 or 15 times as thick of ice accretion. That's the left view. Sleet. That was quite a bit of sleet we had that Wednesday night there at FSU, and areas that see that accumulate, see that sleet accumulate. They're gonna have a scenario here. I know it looks like snow if you don't know, but trust me, I don't have it available to show at this moment, but I had a video. It's really loud, and I was in it. It was sleet, and it was not fun necessarily, but it was interesting to see from a meteorological perspective there. That's why I was at in it, but it was in 2014. And sleet, if you have a whole bunch of way more than that, even accumulated, be all over the surface, and you mix in all the other issues, and that makes things just even slicker. Not great. You want all snow if you can, even if it's a lot, because when you get the other kind of precip in there, it's a problem. And then we do need to talk, though, about some severe weather potential. I know it's a big shift here. The temperature's going to be even warmer down here, maybe than we were thinking in some cases here, especially around Albany. We were thinking maybe freezing rain. Now we're thinking maybe severe weather up there on that Sunday. So that's a problematic storyline as we're looking and as we're tracking things here. I know. Let me go ahead and see what I can pull up. We're going to pull up the American model for that Sunday afternoon, and we're going to say here real quick why we have some issues. That's the only thing. It's a kind of a conditional risk. Granted, I need to see if the SPC sent out the new update here. That's an advantage by being on so late. We can get that and see the models too. But let's see this here real quick. You can see 83, 84 in Central Florida, give or take, on that Sunday afternoon. Even on Starkville, probably about 80 or 81. That's what the red is, 80 plus. The oranges are 70 plus. The yellow is 60 plus. The green is 50 plus. So we have a very big gradient there in like Central Georgia as we're looking and as we're tracking things here. As we give you guys the very latest. And we have the colder, we have temperature below freezing there on Athens, Georgia, the University of Georgia, on a Sunday afternoon. It's just a huge temperature contrast. So we're going to have the overall instability coming into play, and then have some shear from a low pressure area here as we look at it, as we track things. I know high pressure is kind of helping with this winter storm scenario as well across the country, so it's really high in terms of the values of that. So there's a lot going on here, but don't want to get too far into the meteorology on some of that because it's not affecting your daily life and just the actual intricate details. But again, just trying to keep you guys informed here on all this as we give you guys the very latest here. I know when there's a tornado watch, not sure we're going to have that, but you just got to remain alert for favorable conditions there for tornadic activity. Stay tuned for the latest, and in some cases, you might be more to charge the devices have multiple ways to receive alerts. But tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, definitely could see some of those on Sunday. Maybe some gustier winds even, maybe winds, in the order of, let me go ahead and pull that other map up real quick again, and I'll kind of give you an idea of some of the winds we're talking about here. I mean, this is not even the gust, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about here. Sunday afternoon could be pretty gusty, even around dark. Going to be warm. If you're headed out of the beach, this is something. The temperature still won't be that warm necessarily. Not summer. It's going to feel, much more like the winter that we're in coming up. But you see some of these greens are sustained winds of close to about 20 miles an hour on Sunday here. So that's something to keep in mind. That's some pretty strong wind there. And that could be, an issue as we're looking. You can see off of Pensacola there. I mean, we could have even winds at 30. I know 35, 40 sustained even, which is pretty significant. I know last Sunday down toward areas east of Orlando, it kind of caught some folks off guard. Had a high wind warning on the periphery of everything, and we're a little bit, this time the freezing rain, winter weather's further north than last weekend, so we may be on that periphery, and we may have some really gusty winds here Sunday, even outside of any rain. That's possible, and that's possible more towards Jacksonville, Gainesville than actual tornadoes are, because that threat probably more toward the west as we're looking at things. And as we're tracking them there, because we won't have the precip until we already start to lose some of the overall parameters. So I know this is some of that energy. I'll say you see how it kind of fades as we get later at night. But further back, you see some of that is called a ton there of instability kind of coming in there, and you get enough of that mixing in here, and then could have some issues. So that'll be something to watch. I know it says historic winter storm, but that applies for this too, because this is part of the winter storm. But here we're going to actually have some, stronger storms from that, or gusty winds even. That's something we do have to take into account here as well. So we'll be watching everything for the 62 counties, obviously, and beyond for that is needed. Watching the winter weather side for the country here as necessary. If you have a tornado warning there, just make sure you get in that interior room away from windows. Put as many walls between you and the outside as possible. Now, next 7 days in terms of the precipitation forecast, we have so much moisture around here in like Alabama, Mississippi, and then you're going to have cold temperatures, and that's going to lead to black ice concerns, which I'll get to into a minute. If you don't even get the wintry precip initially, you're going to have problems later on probably, and then and some areas are just going to have it from the aftermath of the system with slick conditions. Maybe they catch them off guard even, unfortunately, but quarter inch of rain next 7 days on average around Tallahassee, a tenth of an inch here around Stark. We need the rain to. We're in a drought. The drought monitor is still a very concerning picture. Don't have that in here tonight because there's just so much to talk about here. But I know you can go to cloudweather.com/radar for an interactive look at things. Cloudweather.com, I believe it's /extra. So if you get down the page, you'll have like a national drought map of the 48 states or so, and you'll be able to see what that looks like there. But just it's still something we're watching. Just all this moisture though, gonna have black ice concerns if you have that colder coming in. Not as much locally because we won't have enough of that moisture for most spots. Granted, a few puddles could still remain, I suppose. But overall, that's going to be more to our north where it could be an issue. And you just don't want it to surprise you. Obviously, this is alluding to. It can form on any road, but also along curved drainage due to the melting snow or just rain that freezes up eventually here too. As we're looking and as we're tracking things, as we get the latest information, checking on all the latest here. I know it can be more prevalent at night, but still around in the morning for those that are able to, complete a morning commute, that have work in school. It's something you don't want to catch you off guard because you don't have the big impact from the freezing rain initially, and then classes are in or something, and then you get caught up in this because other areas aren't going to have classes for a while, probably weeks. Some areas will be out of school, and if you don't have power internet, you're probably not going to have virtual classes And it's not going to be because of fun snow. It's going to be because of the ice here in general that we're talking about. Very bad conditions, not good, not what kids want to see either. Just, you're thinking you're going to get to build a snowman because you're out of school for a while from winter storm, and it might not get any snow in some areas that see catastrophic ice implications, except maybe some areas will get lucky with a few flurries. But to the north, it's going to be a big snow event, obviously. Missouri and parts of Oklahoma, all the way across to New York City. So, and down to Washington, D.C. and the like. But another thing we're watching tonight around here locally, there's so much to talk about. Fog. We have fog potential. Already seeing that around Keystone. It's down to a fourth of a mile visibility already there. Cecil Field's down to a fourth of a mile visibility. And Brunswick Glencoe, at this 2:49 a.m. conversation we're having, they're down to about a half a mile visibility here. So, again, we're just giving you guys the very latest on all this. You want to be prepared here for this fog. You want to make sure you slow down and give yourself extra time to reach your destination here in this type of scenario. You want to make sure your vehicle is as visible as possible to other vehicles by using your low beam headlights, and leave plenty of room in front of you between you and that vehicle, so that you're seeing there. Potentially, hopefully you can see it. That's the thing, the visibility could be so low that you're going to have problems. So, got to be really, really careful with that. And we just have so much going on here. I know we don't have any dense fog advisories that I can see here locally yet. But as we look and as we track things here, I just want to pull up the alert map across the country off of the Weather Service site. We're just seeing such a bad situation in terms of the concern here and things. This late at night, they get issued as we're on the air even. No, I'm just trying to pull some stuff up here. Bear with me as the situation does progress. I know. Let me see what I can kind of get up for everybody there at home. I'm going to try to make this full screen here. It's a fluid situation, doing things on the fly, but this is an unbelievable map, and not in a good way. I'm not talking about the fog advisories yet here because we don't have them, but other areas in the country. This map is going to see from weather.gov. This the situation that we're in the country. See all that pink there? That's a winter storm warning. You see it in New Mexico. Even in the southern Colorado, I think a little in there, but you see that in Texas, all over the place. Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, and then you see some winter storm watches still that haven't been upgraded yet. Some winter weather advisors in purple, and let me correct that, kind of clarify that. That's in the very kind of lavender, I guess you would call it, but in the darker purple, that's an ice storm warning in northern Mississippi. As we're looking here in southern Tennessee and in northeast Georgia, you have winter storm warnings. Some of them have been expanded, and you have a winter storm watch under, and some of the cold alerts supersede things. But let me go ahead and click on some of this here, the ice storm warning. It's, around Toccoa, Georgia there. Let me move this map down a little. I'm on the Weather Service sites here, so a little bit more fluid than we sometimes do. But you see Gaines, if you look real close, Georgia, not Florida. And then Toccoa, Georgia there, you have an ice storm warning because the ice scenario is going to be so bad. The alert here talks about maybe a quarter of an inch, but that's if you're lucky. 1 inch is if you're less lucky. You're not lucky at all if you have an inch of ice. And then wind gusts there around 30 miles an hour possible as well. This goes from 1 p.m. Saturday to 10 a.m. Monday. Ice storm warnings are even worse than just a base winter storm warning. Such a high confidence of ice concern. We also have ice storm warnings. Here you see the different information for the Weather Service offices. You have there east of Monroe, Louisiana, going up into like Greenville, Mississippi. You have areas there like Greenwood, Mississippi, far northern Mississippi, northwest Alabama, southern Tennessee. You see areas like Lawrenceburg, Tennessee in here. You have Tupelo, Oxford, and Mississippi under the ice storm warning as well. Just an extreme set of circumstances. You can see total snow and sleet between 1 and 3 in some of these spots, but then ice accumulations between 1/2 and 1 inch, 6 p.m. Friday Central Time to 6 p.m. Sunday. So, and expect paradises that last more than a day and extensive tree damage to the ice due to the ice. And it could honestly be a situation where we end up just having that ice there that is just so thick. It could be, not just a day. It could be more like a week in a lot of spots. Some areas will be even longer in the hardest hit zones, probably. You can see they're even talking about maybe Friday evening commute in some of these spots. we'll see about, the timing on that. But definitely some significant concern there, extreme concern. We have that focal fog right here. That wasn't on the map yet, but that'll be something that might pop up there with a dense fog alert here soon. But you see covered areas here. Just make sure you know your county, as we'll be watching our western zones for some strong to severe storms later Sunday. We've been on for all tornado warning storms the last 6 years. We haven't had many around here lately, but if we have them, and even the severe thunderstorm warnings, we'll be on for the winter storm itself, with the ice and the snow, especially the ice, as we look ahead toward the weekend with special coverage here at points. Just Facebook, Casey Cloud Reacts, Cloud Weather, Twitter /Cloud Casey, YouTube at Cloud Weather, Twitch Cloud Weather, cloudweather.com. So just keep it tuned here. Also, if you're in these areas, I've always talked about the ice storm warning, though, which is not our area whatsoever. You need to make sure you're really, really paying attention to the local meteorologists in those areas, broadcast, digital, weather service, and the like. Make sure you're paying attention because it's going to be very bad for them, not for us, except for that, we're going to have that, severe weather risk in the western counties. Here's an extended forecast over the next 7 days. You see isolated tornadoes possible from Tallahassee westward later Sunday, but that's not why the logo is red. The logo is red because of this historic, catastrophic, devastating winter storm to the north. We will get some of the cold air eventually coming in from that, but we're not going to see the freezing precip from that here, except for maybe a few puddles that still remain, and that becomes black ice. But for the most part, that's not what we're going to be seeing in our area here in the next 7 days. You see how warm it is Friday. That contrast to the air mass is a big problem, and while we have all this stuff to the north, you see Saturday more clouds, maybe a little cooler. Then Sunday warms back up ahead of the frontal system, the overall scenario, that cold front, and we have the scenario in play with this, severe potential, and then to the west, but not as much around Stark. But going to be gusty winds, though. Going to have some gusty winds even around Stark on Sunday, potentially out ahead of things. On Monday, there it's going to cool off. It's going to be even colder than this around Albany Monday morning, where it could, just all of a sudden get close to freezing Monday morning. But other areas will be, a lot warmer as we still have the system coming through the frontal system. By Tuesday, you see 25 there to low. That's, around some of these areas further on Stark. Albany could be in the upper teens Tuesday morning. I'm talking about, you see it warming up to about 50, but in Georgia, around Albany, it might only stay in the 40s. And even on Monday, you're going to have some colder air than what you see on here there. But you see it start to warm up a little Wednesday morning till maybe some areas a hard freeze, and then upper 50s Wednesday. But you see Thursday, the temperatures start to come closer together here, and it's a little precip chance. So that's something that's unusual around here in some ways, and that could be a sign here toward next weekend. It could, it very well may not be, but there's a chance if we could get colder air again come back in, and we could get the mix of some precip there. If that were to happen, well, we could have some wintry precip in the local area, and in theory, that risk would include North Florida and even North Central Florida. I'm talking about maybe even snow here next weekend. Don't get hung up on that, though, and that very well may not happen. The chances of that happening are still very low at this point, and we don't want to. I mean, we have to worry. We're going to have a country that's, in terms of the ice, that's going to have big problems. We just got to focus on that, and a lot of times too. We're gonna, with the tornado threat to the west too, in our western counties on Sunday, and to the west of that, we got to focus on all that, because I know last Sunday, just all of a sudden, once that system kind of got through, the models were just going crazy with this winter storm to the north. So sometimes you'll adjust after one system moves out, and we could see significant model changes. So we don't know what could happen next weekend, but cold air is more than likely, whether we have moisture with that or not. Don't know. So yeah, I mean, it's not gonna be. You better enjoy the warm weather while it lasts here. Like, if you're gonna go out to the beach, be careful. And that cold water's still gonna be the story and the like here. It's not gonna be that fun in the water, but on the sand it might be pretty fun to walk. Some areas, I know there's a current statement down toward Daytona, and there's just be careful. You don't, as it's so warm here, people going out to the beach. The temperatures might not be so warm in the water. Might just want to be walking that sand, but that'd be pretty fun, because if you're gonna do that, it's not gonna, that period to do that isn't gonna last too long. So as we're looking at, as we're tracking things. So again, we'll just continue to watch things, continue to track them here in toward the weather center. We've been on a while with this. There's just so much to cover. Such a big winter weather impact. Such a big deal for our neighbors to the north here. It's going to be a big weather situation. I know everybody tuning in, like, looks like viewer Thomas there on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Do we have the day 3 convective outlook yet? No, we don't. So I'm just checking because I wanted to see if we had that in. I suspect we'll get a marginal risk introduced there, maybe even into some of our western counties there on that Sunday. We don't have any formal risk yet, but probably will. Speaking of different hazards, we do have now some fog showing up at Apalachicola as well. That's down to, when I talk about fog on our map, it shows up when it's like under, half a mile. We have a half a mile there. At Apalachicola, we have a half a mile of Cecil Field, visibility of 4th there, Jacksonville, White House, Naval Outlying Field. We have Brunswick there, half a mile. Now, Palm Coast at 1/4 of a mile. Keystone now is up to about 1 1/2 of a mile there. So, again, just something to watch in terms of that visibility. What you want. What you generally see on a visibility map of, good in terms of not having that fog or smoke or whatever, is 10-mile visibility. So yeah, they reduced it quite a bit. Got to be mindful of that here tonight. As you know, if you're watching this when you're first getting up in the morning, if you're not watching it live, be aware of that too, because Friday morning commute, we could have some fog impact in that. So be very aware. These warmer temperatures, a little warmer than normal, but a lot warmer than they've been for this period that starts to introduce that fog threat as we have some different things come together there with your temperature and the light there, and just the overall moisture levels. So again, that's kind of the storyline for now. We just, are gonna have to come in and be on the air here as necessary. Good bit here in the timeline as we look ahead. So be very mindful here of that. Obviously, I know we're looking, even at the severe threat later on in the timeline here as well in terms of the local picture even, but the winter storm picture is the one that we're really tracking in terms of that national weather storyline. And I'll put up the current temps with the model. Let me switch that. This is going to be a problem here, folks. This winter storm as we look ahead. This is later in the period on Sunday after about, right about sunset or so, actually. Okay, maybe a little earlier. I'm looking at my time step. That'll be 4 Eastern, 3 Central. So a little before sunset for most areas, really, as we're looking at that. But you can kind of see what we're talking about, because sunset's about 6 now here east of Stockholm. That talks about that on my weather station. And just, that's about what it is here, about 6 o'clock sunset there here this time of year. So not quite a sunset, but you're going to have all this winter weather on that Sunday. You can see West Virginia, another area with that wintry weather. As you look here, that, rain coming in here, that, just something that's interesting. But then we could have the cold backside, and that's black ice. You already have the freezing rain before that. And a lot of problems with here. You can just see, it's back this up to early Sunday. That's freezing rain around Atlanta, really bad around Athens. You see some mix of freezing rain and sleet maybe around Greenville, but South Carolina, Charlotte, Raleigh. You still have it all the way back out here into where the ARCLA the ARCLA text there. It's going to be all over the place. It's going to be very bad in some places. You got to take this very seriously, as we're going to run through some numbers here again. Let me go ahead and I'm just going to pull up our number graphic here real quick to reiterate. Now, this is a fluid situation. These numbers, if I say this again, they're going to be different because things update here in the models. I'm basing this more off the European, less off the TFS. And the GFS was a little newer run because the Euro, I just had to do the calculations earlier. It would be on even later than this. So I did the averages, and, we in the Euro higher. And Greenville, South Carolina, Clemson area, big problems. Richmond, Virginia, big problems. Nashville, the same story. Little Rock, looking like it, though. There may be a chance that edges more in the snow. We'll see. Athens, Georgia, have problems. That's the University of Georgia. No, Southern Arkansas, referring back to Arkansas, it could be that Southern Arkansas, Northern Louisiana corridor that has really big problems, more so than Little Rock. Little Rock's still probably going to have a lot of power outages, but it might not be the extreme catastrophic scenario, but still widespread and a high risk. It's not great. So, better than what is presented here, but we'll see. Bowling Green, Shreveport, Atlanta, Knoxville, Dallas, Northwest Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi. Not a fun scenario overall. There's so many areas in here You have UNC Charlotte there in Charlotte, North Carolina, Memphis there, the university there in West Tennessee. And this is not great. Even just a quarter inch of ice or more is going to cause that power outage risk to go up quickly. About a tenth of an inch or so starts to really impact the road conditions. So the point is, even if these numbers, in some cases are way high, I don't think they will be in most cases. You're still going to have big problems, even if these are a bit, a good bit higher than, what it ends up being. But some areas actually probably going to be higher than these numbers. It's not a good situation here. But even if, let's say, Jackson, Mississippi only ends up with 0.2 of an inch of ice, you start to have power outages and you have the roads that are a mess. So the point is, this is going to be a big deal, big problem, big impact, and the like here. You got to take it very seriously. I know it's not fun at all. I know time's running short on this. I almost kind of hesitate saying this in some ways because, roads are going to be busy and you can have accidents. There's all sorts of different things that can happen. But if you do have, the availability there and you're able, to take like a vacation to like Central Florida or something, or even North Florida. I'm talking about Jacksonville area more so because you don't have the severe threat of some wind. If you want to get away from the ice storm, it might be time to take a vacation to the south if you can, but you don't have that much time to shift things around. You don't want to just say evacuate in general. There probably will be situations where some folks will definitely have to evacuate because their homes are damaged, and I'm sure there'll be shelters in certain areas for that, and the like. It's not a hurricane in that traditional sense, but it's not the worst idea if you want to get away from this, if you have the means to get away from this, and the availability in your schedule, maybe go down to, parts of, northeast, central Florida, South Florida. Even Tallahassee probably okay. Just watch out for some strong and severe storms later Sunday. But, as we're looking and as we're tracking things, get away from some of that. It's supposed to be cold, but you won't have the ice storm. You won't be hearing the trees fall. And, in some cases, you might even have to get in that tornado safe spot for a little bit because the trees are cracking so much around you. I've heard stories about this. I've never heard it myself. It almost sounds unbelievable, but these are from reputable people, meteorologists even. This type of stuff sometimes gets meteorologists. I was interested by a tornado in Texas when I was 5 by weather per se. And I didn't have to watch the weather a lot for this type of stuff, but I wasn't interested because in this, weather thing because of ice storms. But some people get interested in this, want to learn why in the world did they have to huddle in a closet for hours when they hear trees cracking around them one night, in their past because of a historic or at least, notable weather event in their past. And this is definitely going to be historic because these numbers, just ice accretions, it's going to be awful. Need to get into that, interior room away from windows here as we're tracking things potentially because, there'll be so many trees. You'll be hearing the power line spark. These are just not good things to talk about. These are not rain totals, folks. These are freezing rain totals. These are ice accumulation totals. Again, a tenth of an inch is bad. Especially around here, it's from Stark, it'd be road, you'd have accidents all over the place. Quarter inch, you start really seeing the power outages. And then you get over a half inch, it starts to really become more and more. And you get over 3/4 of an inch, give or take. You have those widespread outages for sure. And then the long duration ones become likely, where it's just going to take a long time for the crews to fix everything that broke because things are down all over the place. The whole power grid, at least in some, not every case. Gotta hope it's less than I'm thinking. But, some cases have to be rebuilt in some of these different areas. They're not good at all. We're going to recap this graphic here as well before we wrap things up. I just make sure if in these zones we're talking about, where you have snow to the north, that's not why, we have snow every year and, to some degree, granted, this will be a big snow event for New York, but that's something they can handle generally. It's not, necessarily something that's just going to be devastating for by any means. Still, that's a local story, but the logo's not red because of that. The logo's red because of the crippling ice storm that, if you're trying to travel, you really would need to try to stay as far south as you can. Let's say maybe stick to I-10 if you're trying to go west. Even then, you probably have run into some problems there, at least by the time you get to Houston, if not earlier than that, with the slick roads. Even just a tenth of an inch of ice is a problem. But my point is, as you get further north, travel will be impossible. And it's a weekend too. Granted, it's not a holiday weekend. and the like, but travel will literally be impossible in some areas there, from Texas to Oklahoma to Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and even the snow. On the north side, there'll be some areas where travel is just not going to probably happen either. So make sure your emergency supply kit is up to date, including water, canned goods, radios, batteries. Again, I have a fill one. Not everybody, probably, not, just millions of people. Probably millions of people without power. I'm sure of that. Millions will be without power at points in the country at the same time because of this event. But, maybe not millions will be cut off communication all the way, but some folks will. So you want to get that radio so you can get some type of distant signal to know what's going on. Hopefully it's closer to you than a distant signal, but just like the AM FM radio. Now, not everybody has those anymore. And if you don't have power, even if you do, your antenna might not be working good, or might be, if you have a tall one, ice might knock it down. I mean, in this type of situation. So it's a situation where, you got to make sure you really are thinking about what to do, how to know what's going on in this type of scenario. I know there's certain type of satellite internet situations, where people can get that communication information on in, and that in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene there, different types of satellite internet connections that people can, try to, utilize here, and that might be necessary in the wake of this. As we're looking, I know that's why we have, in some cases, some of those rocket launches, Starlink satellite type of scenarios come into play, where those ultimately feed people's internet when they don't have any other way to communicate. So that can be helpful here too. That type of method, if it becomes, it comes to that point, which it probably will in some cases, just make sure you're, getting milk and bread, but time's running out for that. You need those extra blankets, probably. It's going to be a crippling event. Major damage to trees and power equipment will occur in some zones. I know times, getting later and later here, but, you just need to make sure you rush those preparations to completion here during the day on Friday before sunset. I mean, granted, some areas have a little more time. Some areas, you're really cutting it close by even waiting till about sunset Friday, depending on where you are. In the east, you have a little bit more in general time. West, a little less time. Granted, it's going to be such a wide spatial cover to the event here, that's happening as we look ahead in terms of the geography and the timeline. But, you just want to go ahead and do this as quick as possible and get prepared, because this is going to be, long duration event where some schools will be out probably for weeks, because of the scenario here. Not every one of them, some probably just a couple days, a day or two maybe. But some will be a lot longer than that in the hardest hit areas. As we're looking, it could be southern Arkansas and Mississippi, eastern, talking about, when I say eastern, I mean northeast Georgia, like around Toccoa, Gainesville, Georgia, maybe Athens, Georgia, parts of South Carolina, Columbia, not so much maybe, but Clemson, Greenville. Then you have North Carolina, like Raleigh and Charlotte, and areas up into like Virginia as well. Could it just, Tennessee don't want to leave out Nashville. They could have big problems. It's unbelievable, really, talking about this big of a geographic area like this. You don't ever really have this harsh of impact for this many people in the country. Not even a hurricane would do this. Tornadoes are more localized. Damage and wind events, eventually they'll kind of wrap up, but the contrast of the air masses here, the different meteorological triggers for this is not a good situation here that we have coming together. And it's going to be such a wide spatial cover to hurricane. When it hits on the coast, it can cause problems pretty far inland. But this level of impact in terms of the ice, the fallen trees, fallen power lines, it's going to be an unbelievable geographic covered area of that, not in a good way. So please take this very seriously. We're going to go and wrap it up now. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center. Please stay safe. Keep everybody, to our north, assuming you're not in the area they're watching now. Keep them in your thoughts and prayers. This is going to be a historic event. A very, in some cases, a terrifying event here that people are going to, have to try to survive through here, to be quite honest, as we look ahead into toward the timeline. Just trying to keep our eyes on the scenario here. We're going to watch that tornado threat in our western counties on later Sunday as well, so keep that in mind. Probably have a marginal risk or something like that introduced very soon, like within minutes, here as we're looking toward the west, in our western maybe zones there. As we're looking ahead later Sunday. So, isolated tornadoes, damage and wind gusts potentially with that, and into the east, even around Stark, Gainesville, not necessarily that, but we could have just stronger gusty winds. Could have gusts like 40 miles an hour without rain around on Sunday in a few spots. So keep that in mind. What does the Weather Service say in terms of gusts on Sunday? Let me just double check real quick on that. For Stark here, they are saying gust right now. Let me see what they have in their graphic real quick. I just want to see this while, in our last few seconds here. Yeah, they're saying gust, just in general here, 20, maybe even a night, Monday or Sunday night and a Monday, gust over 20. But, that doesn't preclude a gust that could be even higher than that. Maybe even as high as 40 in some areas if it's not Stark, somewhere in north central Florida or the First Coast region outside of range. So, and that's applies to other areas to the west before the rain and storm accent comes in. It'll be stronger to our west, weaken as it gets closer east in terms of that rain and storm accent. But get a little rain from that here east of Stark and the like as we're looking late Sunday, probably very early Monday more so than anything. But this winter storm, major damage expected in some spots there in that corridor from North Texas to about Virginia or so. Snow to the north of that. Gonna have big problems in between. An ice storm warning in play for a lot of areas. Please keep everybody in your thoughts and prayers here. This is gonna be a big deal and a big impact. This is not what we want to see. This is something that's hard to put into words, just how bad it's gonna be, because really we haven't had a big winter storm like this, and maybe, decades in the country to this level. I mean, again, not necessarily surpassing it here, but it could be about the worst winter storm we've had in the country since the storm of the century in 1993, there in March of 93, and then it's going to be a situation where maybe not the storm of the century, because we've had plenty of hurricanes that have been real bad. Some of them, this is going to be worse than some of them. Some of them won't be, in terms of some of them that hit the U.S., but it's still going to be one of the worst storms of this century. I wouldn't call it the worst. Don't want to call it the storm of the century, but one of the worst storms of the century in the country. In terms of the overall impact here. It's going to be one we talk about for years and decades to come, no doubt here, and, just unbelievable here in terms of that impact coming. So, got to keep watching, got to keep tracking. We're back here as warranted in the days ahead. For now, have a great night, and please, 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 if you're in these areas here up north, you got to stay safe.